All right, so, Emily, let's kick things off with traditional grammar. That phrase alone probably gives people flashbacks to school, doesn't it?
Absolutely. I remember those exercises, diagramming sentences and all that. But what's funny is, traditional grammar as we know it isn't just about English. It actually has its roots in ancient Greece and Rome. And those cultures were all about prescribing how language should be used. A big focus on rules, right?
Yes, and the rules were often lifted straight from Latin and Greek, which, well, doesn't always make sense for, say, English. There's that classic example: never end a sentence with a preposition. Such a Latin rule, but in English it's perfectly normal to say, "Who are you talking to?" not "To whom are you talking?" That's not how people actually speak, is it?
Not at all. But schools everywhere were teaching this as gospel. So, traditional grammar wasn't about describing language as people actually used it, but about prescribing how teachers or grammarians thought we should use it. It's kind of like telling everyone to drive on the right side of the road, just because it's proper, even if all your roads are designed for the left.
Exactly. So traditional grammar is, at its core, prescriptive. It aims for correctness over actual use. And I think, for a lot of us, that's why grammar felt like medicine. You had to take your dose, whether you liked it or not.
So let's dig into this word, atomism. Atomism basically means breaking something down to its smallest independent parts. If you imagine a scientist dismantling a car, just laying out all the pieces but never running the engine, that's how early language scholars approached language. They broke it into words, sounds, letters, thinking you could understand it best bit by bit.
And they hadn't quite got round to looking at how all those bits fit together in real life. It's sort of like focusing on ingredients, but never tasting the cake. I remember when I first realised, during my linguistics training, that a lot of our early grammar lessons in school, those rules, they mostly came from Latin. I feel like most people never get told that.
Oh, I had that exact experience. I remember in primary school being told about sentence structure, or that whole never split an infinitive thing. But I found out later we'd borrowed these rules from Latin or Greek, and English just isn't built the same way. It's a different car entirely, if we stick to that analogy.
Yeah, I think atomism makes sense as a starting point. You do need to look at individual parts, right? But if you never put them back together, you miss how language really works. Now, if we roll back the clock further, we end up in ancient India. What's brilliant here is their obsession with spoken language and pronunciation, all because of religion and those incredible Vedic chants. They thought you had to get the sound exactly right, or you'd mess with the sacred meaning.
And that's where Panini comes in. He wrote the Ashtadhyayi, more than 4,000 rules, if you can believe it. The detail is just stunning, like Sanskrit grammar turned into an algorithm. And honestly, it's so systematic that even computer scientists today look at Panini as sort of a proto-programmer, don't they?
Completely, yeah. I once spent weeks digging through modern code and noticed bizarre similarities, almost like Panini was writing a huge set of if this then that instructions for language. But what makes it unique is the focus on the spoken aspect. They analysed how every sound was made, which is quite different from the written focus we see in Greece later on.
And I love that their whole aim was just to get it right, for chanting and ritual. They weren't telling people how they should speak. They were describing how people did speak. That's the birth of description in linguistics right there. Meanwhile, in Greece, total shift toward the written word. Greek scholars were proud of their language, almost to the point of snobbery. They cared about maintaining its purity, especially in poetry, drama, philosophy. So you saw prescriptive grammar set in firmly.
Yeah, and they weren't describing how everyday Athenians spoke in the Agora. No, it was about how the language ought to be, especially in written form. And along with that, the Greeks ended up asking all those big questions. Is language natural, or is it something humans invented? And that, funnily enough, brings us right to the famous debate between Plato and Aristotle. So, let's hash this out. Plato's side first. He argued for what we'd call the naturalist view. For Plato, there's a special connection between words and the things they represent. Like the word circle links to the idea, the ideal form of a circle. It's not just any rough circle you draw, it's the perfect idea of circleness in your mind.
And that's why Plato was obsessed with etymology, digging into the roots of words to find their true meanings. Sort of searching for universal truths hidden in language. I'll admit, there's something charming about the idea that words contain these deep truths about the world.
It is charming, but then you get Aristotle, the conventionalist. He said, hang on, words are just social agreements. That's why you get dog in English, chien in French, kalb in Arabic. Totally different labels for the same thing. So, he argued, language is a kind of collective contract, not a window into the world of ideal forms.
Exactly. And Aristotle's two-part take, form, sound or shape of the word, and matter, meaning or concept, was practical. He set up category systems like nouns, verbs, adjectives, the building blocks. And that's still how we teach grammar classes today, isn't it?
Absolutely. He almost moves towards what we'd now call linguistics, while Plato stays in the philosophical lane. I still find their arguments popping up in modern semantics and linguistics.
So, heading back to India for a sec, there's such an important contrast between Indian descriptive grammar and the Greek prescriptive side. Indian grammarians, especially Panini, systematically described how Sanskrit was actually spoken. That's a huge step, and it's why his rules seem so similar to computer programming logic.
Yeah, like you said, his rules are almost like chemical formulas. I remember working in computational linguistics and thinking, this is basically a modern twist on Panini's logic. He wasn't saying, do it like this. He was saying, here's how it's done. And the structure he set up influenced not just linguistics, but methods in computer science centuries down the line.
It makes you realize how much more scientific describing a language can be versus just prescribing correctness. Panini was interested in accuracy and transmission, not imposing a standard.
Now, the Romans. Practical folk as always. They admired Greece but adapted what suited them and left what didn't. For them, language was about communication and logic, a social tool. Marcus Terentius Varro, for example, discussed how language both reflects society and serves rational debate.
And Priscian, another big Roman name, wrote one of the most complete grammars of Latin ever. He focused on classifying words, their forms and meanings, which laid the groundwork for how later generations taught and studied language. Kind of a handover from philosophical to almost educational motivations. How to use language for learning, reasoning, and even legal debates.
Exactly, and the Romans weren't super invested in philosophical purity. They saw language as a flexible tool for society and education. That practicality shaped European approaches for centuries.
Jumping forward then to the Middle Ages, things swing back to the philosophical. You get speculative grammar. That's where scholars argued that all languages share a hidden, universal grammar, just looking different on the surface. It's almost proto-Chomsky, but centuries too early.
And while that's brewing in Europe, you've got the development of dictionaries. Lexicography really takes off in the West, while in the East, Arabic scholars do amazing phonetic studies. Arabic grammarians were describing exactly how sounds are made in the mouth and throat, miles ahead of their time. It's a shame that their work didn't really get noticed in Europe until much later, during the Crusades and those cross-cultural exchanges.
Those encounters between Arabic, Hebrew, and Christian linguistic traditions, so much sharing of methods, knowledge, and curiosity. It's a real reminder that linguistics evolves out of both collaboration and conflict.
All right, here comes the next big leap. In the 18th and 19th centuries, we get the birth of comparative philology. Suddenly, scholars aren't obsessed with the ideal or correct forms. They're asking, how are languages related? Where did they come from? That's how they started to classify language families.
And they noticed patterns. English, mother. French, mère. Latin, mater. Sanskrit, matar. All tracing back to the same roots. Same with father, pater, pitar. And even night, nacht. Now, nox, naktam. It revealed this idea of a Proto-Indo-European mother tongue. That's just fascinating, isn't it?
It's totally fascinating. And honestly, it's like tracking human family trees, except the relatives are languages. Suddenly, you start to see that so-called dead or boring languages shape the way we speak today. English wouldn't be what it is without all these links.
And so here we are, Oliver. After all these centuries, the atomist approach, splitting language into parts, debating over prescriptive versus descriptive, still echoes through modern linguistics. The big questions haven't really gone away, have they?
They haven't. I mean, is language something natural, emerging from our minds and societies? Or is it an invention, constructed, modified as we go? I'd love to know what Panini and Plato would have thought of each other's work. One focused on real-world detail, the other on abstract ideas. What a conversation.
Exactly. I suppose their debate lives on, in every grammar argument we have today. But what I find most inspiring is that the roots of linguistics, Indian, Greek, Roman and medieval traditions, gave us the tools we use now, whether we're researching the past or studying how people communicate today.
And it means there's always more to explore. So for everyone listening, maybe ask yourself, what do you think? Did language come naturally, or was it invented? And if, say, Panini and Plato met at your dinner table, what would they debate? It's a conversation with no end in sight. Emily, it's been a pleasure as always.
Always a delight, Oliver. And for our listeners, thanks for joining us on this journey through linguistic history. We'll see you next time. Until then, take care and keep asking questions about language.